All right, we are here with Isaiah Crossman, who is one of the most experienced people I know when it comes to developing early stage sales teams. He understands hiring at a very deep level. He was at some pretty epic and well-known New York City startups, BounceX, which eventually became Wonderkind, and then Tropic as well, where he rose to be the CRO after being the first salesperson. And most recently, he's actually started a business called Repeatability that is very much focused on sales hiring and helping founders avoid mistakes. Isaiah, thanks for coming on. Why don't you give a quick overview of repeatability and why sales hiring is so important to you?
Yeah, dude, I'm happy to be here. Pumped to chat. I don't want to go too deep on what we're doing. I think it's so annoying when you're like, all right, I got to listen to this podcast. It's going to be interesting. And then this guy just like plugs his thing the whole time. We work with mostly startups. It's very hard to build a sales team. It's hard to get the right people on the team. And it's hard to teach them to do the sale well or figure out how to do the sale well. And we do both of those things. So hiring, help founders evaluate candidates. Is this person any good? We'll talk a lot about, honestly, the tricks to doing that today. So spill the beans. And then, helping people design their sale. What should you say on the phone and teach it to your team? Doing it with somebody else off the Wonderkind BounceX team and trying to get a few other people involved. And we're hiring. So anyone who wants to get into recruiting, hit me up.
Awesome. All right, let's jump right into it. So what are your top 3 interview questions that you like to ask a sales rep in 2025 that give you the most value when you're making a hiring decision?
I actually don't ask that many questions. I have two or three like questions I ask or things I say in every interview. I think the first 2 interviews in the interview process are the most important. We'll talk about the second one maybe in a couple of minutes. On a first interview, I basically just start with some version of tell me about yourself. What do I need to know about you? And the reason I ask that is I'm like, anyone who says they're an elite salesperson or any good salesperson is going to basically be able to think, what is Isaiah actually trying to learn about me here? Does he want me to just run through my resume, or is he trying to figure out maybe, am I actually a good fit for his team? And so it just gives an opportunity for a good salesperson to teach to the test. So it actually ends up being like a really good natural sorter. I also love to ask like something like, teach me how to sell. If I was like, hey, I got 2 minutes real quick, what do I need to know? Or how do you sell? Teach me, that kind of thing. I'm just trying to see, does this person actually understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and can they explain it simply? I think a really good way to figure out, is somebody actually like both like smart and also compelling, is can they just make things straightforward, easy to understand? And then the third thing I do in every interview is I'll just be like a bit of expectation setting. Like the kind of startups that we work with and that I've been a part of, Tropic, BounceX, Wonderkind, they're like super hardworking teams. Like it is more than 40 hours a week. And I just tell people that. And it's not a challenge or anything. This is how it is here. This is how we work. And I'm putting it out there more so you can be like, if you're like, oh, I don't want to come in and realize no one leaves at 5 and then be unhappy. It's better to figure that out now. I go through those 3 things. Tell me about yourself, teach me how to sell, and then a bit of expectation setting. And then based on the answers, I will dig into all of this stuff. But that really is like pretty much the interview guide. And my clients are going to be like, why do we have to pay you if you're giving this all away here? But like, this really is like, mostly if I tell a founder, hey, do a first interview, that for me is the first interview. What do you think?
So I guess really interesting. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Like you need people that are aware enough to understand what they should be talking about in that conversation. I do also think that people that understand how to make complex topics digestible are the smartest people in the world and the most effective at convincing people to do anything. So I think that's a hallmark I'm always looking out for. And I'm curious, the questions you mentioned are simple in nature, but what is the nuance that you're looking for in the answers that you think like your expertise is really good at figuring out what's really good and what's not?
Think about, tell me about yourself. Yeah, you could go through your resume. I'll usually tell a client or like a founder I'm advising, like, hey, here's what you don't want to see. So just a long monologue, whatever. Good is, do they explain like why they've been successful? Do they explain like a track record of success? Look, I got into this business because like was like a world champion debater. Like just knowing to bring that kind of thing up is like, they've thought about how to make themselves sound compelling. Do they talk about their work ethic? What other people would say about them? Things they've done in the past? Do they keep it tidy? Do they talk about things managers have said about them? That kind of thing. Yeah, just figure, I don't want to go to here's the answer key, but just figuring out like, what does the interviewer like have on their scorecard and how can I just hack into that and try to answer in the way that they're really looking for? And by the way, this is the same in sales. Like, a lot of times when a customer asks you a question or objects to something on a sales call, the thing they're at, like when a customer says, oh, can you tell me about onboarding? They don't actually care on the discovery call literally how it works. What they're really wondering is it going to be a huge pain in the ass to onboard this product and set this thing up? And so when a customer says, hey, can you tell me about onboarding? The first thing I usually say, assuming it's the case, is I'll be like, look, first thing, it's very straightforward to get this set up. That's not what they asked, but it's what they're wondering. And same thing for this question. So don't worry so much about, hey, tell me about yourself. It's what is he trying to figure out? And for teach me how to sell, it's again, like, I'm like, oh, should I give the whole answer key? But I think it's just if you took like the best salesperson in the world or whoever you think on LinkedIn has the best like ideas about sales and asked them to distill how to sell into 2 sentences, what would be the most important things they would say? Do you know to say that? A bad answer would be like, and I don't know, it would be like, yeah, like the way I sell is I do the most activity and I'm just like really on the ball. Like I'm like very organized. I'm very hardworking. Like those things are good, but that's not why people buy. You're not going to make somebody go from like never sold before to hitting quota or crushing quota with that information. You need to get into like discovery and why that exists and everything that comes after that. And then, yeah, the expectation setting stuff is really black and white. It's like, do you opt in hard to that or not? I don't know if that's like a helpful answer.
We call the expectation setting on that anti-selling. It's something we had come up with at Closer IQ to make sure people are bought in. And like that works in sales too, right? Like you want to make sure that customers are bought in and willing to accept a little bit of friction to make sure that they have conviction that it's the right solution. Let's talk about interview process for a second. What part of your interview process do you think gives you the highest conviction that someone's going to be great?
I think this is an easy one. I think it's the mock call. So basically the way I run the interview process is just like a quick 15-minute first interview so we can see a lot of candidates. And then immediate second step is the mock. I think a lot of people get this wrong. I think a lot of people bury the like mock or exercise or whatever you want to call it, presentation, like deep in their interview process. And they've done 5 interviews and spent all this time only to see the person like not be a fit at a very late stage. So I want to pull that really far forward, like early into the interview process. So for me, it's like a mock, usually discovery call. And usually I ask the candidate to sell like my product to me. So if I'm the CRO of Tropic, I'm like, I want you to sell Tropic to me. Some people think it's better to have them sell their own product. I personally don't like that because I think I can't evaluate that sale nearly as well as my own. And I can't compare candidates as easily. And I like the fact that when you have to sell my product to me, you have to do a little bit of learning. And again, I can test smarts for were you able to pick up what we do from afar. And some people listening to this might be like, that's not fair or whatever. But I think it is actually fair because some candidates absolutely nail it. And if some people can nail it and it helps them stand out from everyone else, I think that's like actually a very reasonable, fair test. So for me, it's the mock.
I totally agree. And I think the things that you really want to look out for are someone that is smart enough to learn a little bit about your industry and your process throughout the interview process and do some of their own research, right? Because they're going to have to be able to do this by themselves. And then they've got to be able to apply that. And if they can't figure some of that stuff out during that stretch, then they're probably not going to be a good fit. And they don't need to know really esoteric things about the product or certain features. They just need to be able to know how to handle that part of the conversation when they get objections. And like we were talking about before,
it's not
understand
a
the
test
question
of like,
behind the question.
Exactly. It's not a test of can you really learn our entire sale? We're not going to throw complicated objections at you. It's more like, can you figure out the rough outline of how to position this thing to make it sound compelling? And then can you put together a sales call that makes sense? Do you like do the right discovery or do you do the wrong discovery? Do you do it in the right order? What do you do with that information? That kind of stuff. Yeah, I agree. I think that's the way to go.
What information do you typically give them for prep for this? Are you giving them a full brief or you just what's the docket you give someone before they get into this mock interview?
I've been thinking a lot about this. I'm curious to hear what you think. I'll tell you where my head is currently at. Right now, I think one, you have to consider like the like weirdness of the product, like how complex or like unusual or esoteric is the thing that you're asking them to sell to you. If you sell some really weird like technical software that the person probably doesn't know anything about, you've got to give more information. And then I also think you need to account for the experience level of the salesperson. So you have a 2x2 grid. If the salesperson has never done sales before or is very early in their career, I think it's better to give them more information, even potentially recordings of real sales calls. And then if they're super experienced, I think you give them less and you let them figure it out and see how they do. And then same for like simple product, complicated product. And I have clients who do all of the above and we modify the prompts for them accordingly.
Yeah, I generally think that you need to give them some brief of sorts so they understand exactly who they're going to be speaking to. So they can do some research on the company. So that's important, right? To see if they can do some of that prep beforehand. And I think you want to make sure, you don't need to tell them necessarily like what the customer's pain points are and things like that. They should be able to try to surface the most important things during the call. But I think you want to give them enough information so they have a little bit of context on the product and context on the customer. And if they have that, then that's usually enough to go off of. You can get a little more detail if you need, but that's usually enough.
Agree, exactly. Sometimes I'll go really simple if the sale is simple and just be like, hey, we want you to do a discovery call for Tropic. Like Tropic was a pretty straightforward sale, but it was straightforward to figure out how the sale should work. There was tons of information available on the internet and be like, this is like the person you're selling to. It's a discovery call and leave it at that. You got to be thoughtful about what your sale is like and who you're targeting. And then don't just blindly do the one thing we said here. You got to be a little bit thoughtful about this one.
You've hired a lot of reps. The best rep or reps that you've ever hired, is there a single trait that they've had that convinced you they were going to be great?
So the best people I've ever hired in the interview process, they just ran it like a sale. I've again thought a lot about this. They just ran the process like a sale. It was like everything they did, the follow-ups, the messages before the meetings, getting my cell phone number, texting me, calling me, like just driving it forward, like getting other people at the company, talking to them offline, getting them to like them. Like I would have people being like, oh, like I just talked to so-and-so, this person's amazing, like that kind of thing. And it's just, if they're going to do that now, they're probably going to do that for our customers. And by the way, if they're not doing that now, they're probably not going to do it for the customers. So it's like that. And then obviously just execution in the mock. I really do think the mock is unfortunately so telling. I think people find it frustrating that so much emphasis is placed on that. Some people don't like mocks or think they don't do them well, but you combine that with just running the interview process like a sale. I think that's the answer. I don't think you can pin it to one attribute, like how smart are they or how hardworking are they? And there's too many attributes to consider. But I think the one common thread across all great candidates has been that they just ran the hiring process, interview process really well.
Yeah, it's a show me, don't tell me situation. But I have a follow-up on that. Is if a candidate's coming from a job where they're performing really well, right? They're at a good company, they're making good money, or maybe you've outbounded to them. Does that change your grading rubric at all in terms of how much effort they're putting into running the process? Or is the bar on that the same no matter who it is?
So one thing I think I do a little differently than a lot of companies is I always personally and also recommend people put like a heavy hitter in the first interview. And so I'm going to try to I'm going to figure out very quickly, is this candidate awesome or not? And then if they are, I'm going to really go hard in the paint to get them excited. So if I can't get them excited, then what are we even doing? I have no point continuing the process. But if they're excited, then yeah, like even if we went outbound to them, I expect them to go hard in the paint to earn the role. Because it's okay, I didn't hit you up, but if you're like going to take our time and go through the process, I want to see that you want it. And I actually do worry about people coming from like big companies where on paper they've been successful, but they don't want to do that stuff. Again, the people that I work with are startups. Like I don't think startups should want those people. I don't think those people should want to go to startups. Yeah, I don't really have a different standard for those people. Maybe like coming into the first interview, but if I'm like going to try my hardest to get you pumped up about the company and the role, and then you like don't do those things, then it's probably not a good fit. And that's okay, by the way, no judgment. I am evaluating that. And I would recommend really any founder or anyone building a sales team do the same.
So do you spend at least part of that first interview, once you get a sense that they're going to be a good fit, trying to get them really excited about the role?
Definitely. I feel like it usually takes like between 1 and 7 minutes to figure out like, is this person awesome? And then as soon as I feel like the person's great, like, by the way, if I don't get that right away, I will continue to test. There are definitely candidates where like at minute 10, I'm like, wait, I misunderstood this. Like this person is awesome or whatever. Some people just take time to warm up to. But yeah, then I'm like, I will go into selling mode for sure. And by the way, I'm not overselling it. It's just like, I will focus on like why the company's awesome, how the team is doing, why our leadership team is great, whatever it is, all the reasons. And I do 15-minute first interviews, but I rarely schedule anything in like the other 15 minutes of that half an hour. So then I have time to do other work if the interview just goes 15 minutes, but every once in a while, one will run way over. I think it's nice to have that room. You can still do way more interviews in a day if you do it this way, even though you're not double stacking them, because you just have more mental clarity, you have more time for follow-ups, all of that. So it gives you the opportunity to go a little later occasionally.
I think that makes total sense. What about red flags, right? What are the 1 or 2 red flags that you have really high conviction on that you can spot early on where like this person's not going to be a fit?
There's the simple stuff like we already talked about, like long monologues, like just life story, like not very self-aware. You can usually tell when someone is like a good yapper, like they can chat with you and engage you in a conversation and they're asking you questions and like just making it fun to chat with them. So that kind of stuff can be a red flag. The big thing for me really, and I know a lot of people are going to hate this, but if you ask a question about work-life balance or something in the interview, for me, that's a red flag for 2 reasons. Like, by the way, I'm pro work-life balance. Like, of course, everyone wants balance. It's like insane to think that anybody wouldn't. But 1, I'm looking for people who want to work very hard almost always. But 2, I think there's like an EQ element where I think the best people know that they are going to get that information at some point in the process, but that they shouldn't ask it so explicitly. So again, I'm giving away like a lot of the inside information, but really for me, that's like a deal breaker for a combination of if it's so important to you that you'd bring it up at like minute like 12 of knowing each other, we might just not be the right fit for each other. By the way, there's lots of jobs where that's totally fine. I'm just like, for an intense startup sales job, I don't think you'll be happy. And so then the flip side of that, or the other piece of it is just, yeah, I think there's just, you should be like a great salesperson. It might be important to them, but they'll find a way to land the plane on that in a way that doesn't hurt their chances.
Yeah, I agree. I think if someone talks about work-life balance during the interview process, then it just shows a lack of awareness that they don't understand how bad that could look to the
Exactly.
interviewer. And if they don't understand that, then what are they going to misinterpret or misread when they're trying to sell something and you're not there?
And like people really underweight the extent to which a sales interview is just like testing you and all the things you're going to do in the job. That's why I weight that kind of thing so heavily, because if you're going to go to a customer call and inadvertently put your foot in your mouth and not realize, that's a major risk. And that's what asking that question is. Even though some people, like people who come from outside of the sales world, will say that this is wrong, but just the nature of what we do specifically, I think we have to be thinking about this, especially when we're advising other companies and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. What metrics from a candidate's track record, when you're digging into their background, what's the stuff that you focus on the most, that you weight the most?
I actually don't weight metrics very heavily. I think like from one company to another, they're like not, they don't necessarily mean anything. It can be very hard to compare. People can lie. I'm not saying that everyone is lying, but it's almost just like, why like risk that? The one exception is like when you have a way to like verify somebody's metrics, if they show you like a screenshot from Salesforce or something, I'm like, that can be interesting. Or if they're like, I like to think I'm like a decent judge of like honesty. And you can just tell when someone like they really understand it's very detailed. That can be helpful. I'm just looking for one long stint somewhere as like a sort of objective measure. And like, again, we're in an era of more layoffs and all that. I'm not trying to touch every hiring third rail, but if you can show that you've been like somewhere for 3 or 4 years, just once, even in the last 5 or 6 years, you probably performed pretty well. Not always, not a given, but I would say that's the biggest just like objective measure that I look for. I don't weight performance that heavily. I will weight like a references like interpretation of someone's performance a little more heavily, but even then, I do think people like lie for their friends. So
Yeah.
be careful.
Yeah. I think you can tell oftentimes based on how people talk about their numbers, how well they know them and recall them. And they can talk about like where they ranked or what the quota was, how they performed
Right.
to it. How they speak about it is more important than the actual numbers, I think, in many cases.
Right, for sure. And I've definitely hired people who like didn't have the best numbers in some role, and I've definitely hired people who like talked about their numbers. But yeah, I just think I can much more reliably assess a candidate based on the 3 questions we talked about in the beginning. Tell me about yourself, teach me to sell, expectations stuff. Then I can this. I'm like, I'd rather just use the thing I can like test more accurately.
2 questions. One, do you ever do back channel references without getting the person referred into you to reach out
No.
to? And then, okay, so no. And then I'm curious as to why. And then 2 is, what are the questions you're asking during the reference checks so you're making sure that it's valuable because you are talking to their friend?
Yeah, so I guess I said no very quickly to back channels. I'll do them if I personally know the person that I'm back channeling on and I feel good about it. This is an area where I think I'm like going like with the people who don't like the third rail topics, where I just think it's uncool to hit up a bunch of people. Like I know somebody who got their spot blown up by a back channel reference where their boss says, I just got hit up for a back channel on you. What is up with that? And I'm like, the risk of that to me, I just would never want to put a candidate in that situation. And I just believe that I can get enough information about them from them directly, from the mock, and from their references that I do in a standardized way. I also just don't necessarily think that like a back channel reference, like they could say whatever about a candidate. They may not really know. So I think you're just adding a lot of risk to a process that you don't need to add. And then on what I do ask, the main thing I try to figure out by the way, references are non-negotiable. You should do references, just get them from the candidate. Only managers, nobody cares about peers. For managers, maybe you get people who reported to them, but mostly for salespeople, we're looking for former managers. And what I'm really trying to look for is, one, does this person just go hard in the paint for them? Are they like, this person rocks? Like I just have seen enough pattern matching to know what great looks like. And then 2, I just really try to figure out like, what do they not like? Like, what is the actual con of this person? Everybody has cons, like everyone. And so I think I'm just pretty solid at getting in there and needling them to figure it out. So I'll be like, okay, like what do I need to coach them on? And then they'll be like, oh, I really am having a hard time thinking of anything. I'll be like, look, like everybody has something. And then I'll like volunteer something about myself. And then I'll be like, what do you think? I'm trying to like think through every angle of this. Yeah. And I just keep asking. And then another question, I'll be like, look, I'll often come back to this one later. So I like let it breathe. I'll be like, hey, if I needed to hire like a counterpart for them or like an assistant or like someone to partner with them, like a sales engineer, like what skills do you think that person would need to have to balance them out? I heard that somewhere. I didn't come up with that, but it's a really good way to make it low risk for them to give the potential like downsides to a candidate. Usually by the time I get to references, the very last thing I do before making an offer, I'm usually like pretty high conviction on the person. And I can only think of one or two times, like once I can remember specifically, like really liking a candidate, but then getting on the reference calls and both of them were like pretty major red flags. And we ended up deciding to not move forward with the offer. And I never make an offer like contingent on references. We just don't make an offer until the references are done.
I really like that. I know it wasn't yours originally, but that question about what would their counterpart how they complement them, because it shows you where those potential weaknesses would be.
Yeah, I have a good like how to do references guide, just like a Google Doc that I've used for years. I'll send it to you. And if anyone who's listening to I have no idea how many people will listen to this, but if anyone wants it, just like LinkedIn message me or email me and I'll happily send it to you. It's a good, like you can just run through the questions kind of thing.
I think that needs to be some LinkedIn content that you gate with a like and a follow or something, or a comment.
I don't know. That stuff, I don't know if you do that. I'm like, I can't bring myself to do the comment, whatever thing. I can't do it. I don't know.
I don't think I've done it, or at least it's certainly not part of my repertoire if I've done it before, but it's tough when you understand the game too.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard.
All right. Last question, because I know you thought it was interesting, but what's a sales hiring mistake that you'd redo, or a best practice, or what the best practice that it taught you?
Yeah, the biggest, like almost all of the hiring mistakes that I've made, I think come down to three things. One, just like inexperience. And it just took me a while to become good at hiring, and there's nothing you can do about that. So just ignore it. Like you just need to get reps under your belt or get some help, advice from somebody who actually knows how to do this. The two mistakes that I've made that are fixable, one is like overvaluing charisma. Like salespeople are very charismatic. And so like you need to go into an interview with a salesperson a little bit with your guard up and being like, I'm not going to let you Jedi mind trick me into liking you. Like I'm going to evaluate you very objectively. And I have made mistakes on just like very charismatic people who they're really good at getting people to be like hyped up about them, but then that hides the like truth about them. And then the other one is like outsourcing my thinking to somebody who like doesn't have like my best interests at heart necessarily. So overweighting like what a friend of mine says about somebody, or so overweighting like what a P from another department being like, this is like the best, like overweighting the value of their like unsolicited reference basically, and not thinking enough for myself. And even like in our business with our clients, we help our clients evaluate, but really we're trying to teach them to evaluate effectively. We're not like, hey, we do the interview process for you. It's like, we will just give you everything you know to be great at doing the interview process yourself. Like nobody should outsource their thinking on candidates to anyone. You need to go through the reps to get the experience, and you should be making your own decision based on whatever facts you can get from the process.
I think those are really good lessons to think about. All right, Isaiah, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time, man. I think people need to consume more of your content, because the stuff you've been posting on LinkedIn is really good. And I think that I'm really excited for this new business you guys are starting, because you obviously know this sales hiring space really well.